Nadeem, you want me to start? We ready? What do you think? Can I start? Ibrahim? Okay. Good? You're the boss. I'm not the boss. I'm actually not the boss. I'm not the boss. Sometimes it seems that way. Okay, I hope you all had a good lunch. The weather today is perfect. Okay, it doesn't get any better than this. This is some nice colors. The sun is out. A little bit of a breeze. I was thinking I was going to go to sleep across the street in the park. In one of the tents. Yes, that's true. Okay, so let's take just one step back. Okay, I'd like to just do a few reflections on the last session. Okay, the session before lunch. What are your takeaway lessons? What were your important lessons from the last session? Okay, thoughts about what did you learn? Let me remind you, we talked about politics, right? And political analysis and health reform, okay? Power. We talked about power, okay?
Politics definition.
The definition of politics.
Why is not important?
What? What was the definition? Do you remember the definition?
When, how, who. Yeah. Who, timing.
You have to get them in the right order, okay?
I don't deal with politics.
Do you have a family?
Yes.
Yes. Then you deal with politics.
I may compromise.
Okay. Who gets what, when, and how? These are easy English words. Who gets what, when, and how? Okay? Any other reflections on the last session? Takeaway? Lessons? Kapo-san?
Political skills.
You need to build political skills. This is learnable. It's something you can learn, and it's something you need as part of the change process. What else?
I think upon further reflection, definition of power, the hard and soft power.
There's both hard and soft power. Can you tell us the difference between hard and
hard is when you were talking about military force, essentially, and I think soft, we can even say the development, humanitarian systems would be soft power.
Soft is all of the non-material ways, okay? Ways of persuasion, use of symbols, okay? Hard involves sometimes threats. It can involve giving people money, okay? It can involve, in some cases, lawsuits, right?
Another thing that sort of struck is that by being aware of the stakeholder analysis or the mapping can then help you be opportunistic and know when something has changed a bit and when you might be able to push those in power to sort of move effectively.
So it's partly a question of when do you do this, right? And looking at the landscape does change over time. It helps you to keep track of what's changed and what are your opportunities for change. There's a literature about the policy process that talks about windows of opportunity. Windows of opportunity, when you can get your change through. Windows of opportunity can be things like, sometimes things like disasters. Okay, the occupational safety and health legislation in the United States occurred in the late 1960s when there was a large coal mine disaster. Okay. Disasters can be opportunities for introducing change. Okay, so the question is, how do you recognize windows of opportunity when you can get your changes through? Okay, any other reflections or take-homes from the previous session? Ibrahim?
I appreciated the power of consultation and in introducing any reform or health sector reform, there's a need to do stakeholder mapping to look at those who are largely in favor, who are moderately in favor, those who are neither here nor there, those who are extremely against, and others. Once identified, you'll be able to move.
These are judgments. I liked your first point, Ibrahim, which is the role of consultation. Talking to people alone can sometimes actually change the way they think, even if you think they're opponents. So, and by talking to them, you can look for areas of agreement. And you can look for areas of agreement in principles. Okay? Any other reflections? So the second point was doing stakeholder analysis, number one, is not hard. And number two, if you're trying to produce a change that is important for you, this stuff is necessary. Okay? Doing explicit analysis of stakeholders, coming up with strategies, and thinking about how to make the political landscape more supportive for the change that you want. If you're doing a $20 million, $50 million, $100 million project to produce health reform, spending some time and thinking about the stakeholders and how to make who you should talk to and who should talk to them. So in the instance of the health reform in Mexico that happened in the year 2003, so I knew the minister. He spent time talking to legislators. He went to the legislature, he talked to them, and he met them individually, and he had somebody plan who does he meet and what does he say. And the second point is, it's not just stakeholder analysis, but technical analysis. Think about doing technical analysis in using it in the process of political persuasion. Okay? So technical analysis is not just to get something published and on paper, but it becomes something that you use. And out of a large technical analysis, you may only use one or two figures. So choosing the figures to use, choosing the numbers, is important. Okay? Any other reflections? Okay. So we're going to move now to our opportunity to do our own political analysis. Okay. And we're going to start with, you know, Michael's 5 steps. And the first step is, so what is the problem? What are the problems that existed in this country, in the case in West Africa? What were the problems that they wanted to address? The problems in society. So this is the concrete problems that existed that the reform team wanted to meet. What problems did they have? So lack of financial risk protection. What does that mean in this instance?
There were no health schemes at the national level to protect people. People were paying out of pocket. There were just limited community health schemes at the level of like small communities.
Right, community health insurance schemes. And what were people upset about?
They were upset about paying out of pocket when getting health care.
So people, this gets back again to, were people happy? No. They were unhappy. Okay? They didn't like having to pay. Okay? So what else? What were the other problems that existed that this country confronted at this time? What else was going on in the health sector? Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I kind of did a half thing, but I wasn't sure. But anyway, since I have the mic. Well, I think the other problem was that there were limited options for actually getting coverage. So
Okay.
there weren't other options that people could actually tap into.
Okay, so there were limited options. Anything else? Amy, did you?
I did a half But I thought it was interesting that it's a fledgling democracy, that it had the first multi-party elections in 2000. So there's some kind of point of proof through the health sector related to democracy that's an interesting.
This is really important, people, okay? When we're talking about health reform, what's happening in the political system makes a difference. And we've seen in a lot of countries around the world that reforms tend to happen after democratization. Okay, that democracy and multi-party elections opens opportunities for people to introduce reforms, and it is possible. I'm not saying that it happens all the time, but it opens opportunities for politicians to hear and respond to the dissatisfactions that exist in society. Okay? Because we've seen major reforms happen in Korea. We saw Mexico's major reform happened after the first time that there was a new party elected in power after 71 years. Okay? Mexico had 71 years of the same party. Okay? It's called the PRI, Partido Revolucionario Institucional. Okay? They were in power 71 years. And then after the first time for a non-PRI person to be elected, of course he happened to have been previously President Coca-Cola in Mexico, but he had a health minister who introduced a major reform. You're correct. Yes?
How to deal with, sorry, his question is like how to deal with non-popular measures, especially when you have a kind of democracy in place, for example, like closing hospitals.
Okay, so the question is, it's a very good question, how to deal with unpopular policies when you have a democracy, okay, like closing hospitals. Does anyone have any good ideas how to deal with unpopular things to do when you have, so you can travel to Ukraine and learn.
The best option is to delegate the decision to the local community.
Delegate to the local community, okay? So don't make it at the center, make the decision in the community. So this is called, in English, the English phrase is pass the buck, okay? Give it to someone else, or give it to someone in the opposition party to do. Any other ideas about how to deal with unpleasant, unpopular decisions? Politicians don't like to make unpopular decisions that hurt. One of the most difficult things to do in a democracy is to take away benefits from people who have them. Okay? Perceived benefits. Thank you.
This might be a bit more difficult, but I think there's a way to discuss, to show those that think that they're losing something, that by closing the hospitals or whatever the unpopular decision was, they're actually gaining better and more.
So frame the negative decision as positive. To say you're not taking away, you're giving them more. By closing your hospital, you'll get access to this other hospital that's better, that works. Maybe you put in buses so that they can get there. Okay? But you take a negative decision and make it seem positive. Any other ideas?
Yes, please.
Okay? We have lots of ideas. Do you have to make the decision today?
Sometimes timing is very important.
Timing.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Timing, because like a political party that just won an election, at that point in time, they are already very popular.
Right. So when you have what's called political capital, okay, you make it at the beginning when you're popular, or you make it at the end
When you are going.
when you know you're going to leave. Okay? Or, you know, in this country, sometimes they make bad decisions and announce them on Friday at 4 o'clock when the news cycle is closed. Although it's not now with social media, it's not the same. Any other ideas? So, there's some free consulting. But in general, taking away benefits from people, in taking away perceived benefits, very difficult. Closing hospitals, always very difficult. Saying that it's to improve the overall system, to improve efficiency, to give people additional benefits. We're taking this away, but we're giving you this. Or close the hospital in your enemy's territory. You know, you close it in the opposition parties. That's not a very nice thing to do, but it's...
I don't know if this would translate to health, but sacrifice for the greater good. I mean, I've heard this World War II and kind of rationing and kind of having coherence around a national identity or identity.
So it's putting it, this gets back to the positive role of politicians. Doing it at a time when you can talk about the nation's future. Okay, so let's go back to the case after that little digression to Kyrgyzstan. But closing hospitals, it would be a great case study. Okay. So, are there any other problems that this was? We got onto this because of the point that that democratization provides opportunities for reform. Okay. Any other problems?
They also were puzzled over where to get the financing for.
Where to get the money, how to finance it. So this is also similar to other cases that we talked about. Raised expectations. Okay, so people, can you say a little more?
So it has already been promised by the parties that they are going to make sure that everybody is covered. So the people know that something would happen during that time.
It's been discussed before. It's part of the public debate. Okay? Yes. Power. It's all about power. Sometimes power can be solved. Yeah.
To go back to the expectations and financing, the amount of expectations they put on were a major hindrance in finding financing because they weren't able to actually say that we will take co-pays from people because people expected completely free service. So they couldn't even mobilize that, and they didn't want to remind people of the old party that used to make them pay at point of healthcare. So that's a huge amount of financing that they could have gotten from people that were closed and they weren't able to tap that because of the promises they made. They wanted to cover everyone for everything.
Everyone for everything for free.
For free.
Okay. Okay. So, how would the reform what was the reform that the party in power was considering? So how would you describe the policy? What did the policy include? Okay? Because the content of the policy helps to structure the political obstacles and helps to structure the political landscape. What was the policy they were proposing? The policy? My friends?
They wanted a policy that will be for the country's poorest people who have no capacity to pay on annual premium.
Okay. And what else? And what would the policy include? What would it look like?
No, it would be like a policy that will involve certain groups of people,
okay.
The poorest.
The poorest people?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else about the policy? Would it be an insurance policy?
It's an insurance policy that will cover all poor.
Okay. And how were they going to pay for it?
That was the problem because they don't have money at that point in time. And we were looking for ways where they could raise money.
Okay. Did they have any ideas?
Yeah, there were several ideas they looked at.
What were their ideas?
We were looking at same parts using these luxury goods. And
Okay.
taxing luxury goods as a way of
We're going to
making
call that a value-added tax rather than a sin tax. Okay, buying value-added goods is not necessarily a sin. Okay?
luxury goods.
So we'll call that a value-added tax. Okay? Any other aspects to the policy that they were thinking about? Okay?
So while the technocrats were saying that the benefit package should focus on most common, less expensive conditions and move from there and expand coverage, the politicians didn't want that. They wanted the more expensive, less frequent, because they wanted to do the financial risk protection part.
Right.
And like cover the
Okay.
expensive stuff.
So they constructed a technical advisory committee, right? And those guys were putting together the policy, okay? And they said, let's start with a limited package and move from there. And the people in the party said, we're not so happy with the approach of this technical committee. Okay, anything else?
So, community-based health insurance schemes.
There were already some community-based schemes.
And they were growing, so the party needed to recognize them, so they proposed a plan to give them official recognition so that they can provide government subsidies.
So part of the question was how to deal with the existing community insurance schemes and how they would relate to the policy and how they get involved. Okay?
I think an important part is the time frame, so they have less than a year.
So they got elected in 2000.
Yeah.
It was 2003. 3 years have passed, and 3 years their technical expert committee has been sitting there considering different options, not making much progress, and the party is getting.
I think there's some strategic opportunity there,
So the party is getting nervous. They say, you guys have just been sitting there twiddling your thumbs and, you know, as my wife would say, endlessly admiring the problems and not giving us a solution. And the elections are coming. Okay? So what do we do? So what you do is you bring in a group of experts who is advising the party. Okay? You're going to get 2 of these per table to work on. And you guys are the experts that are brought in to advise the party because you've just been to this course at the World Bank and you've learned about all of the technical aspects of health reform and you've learned about the politics. And so they've asked you to look at the stakeholders, okay? Identify 2, 3, or 4 key stakeholders, figure out their position and their power on this policy, and you guys are going to work together. And come up with some strategies about what should this government do. Okay? What are the political strategies? Look, do your stakeholder analysis. Any questions?
Number one, National Medical Association. What about the party? Number 2, the commercial party leaders. Number 3, government agencies. Number 4, local council companies. What about the party itself?
No, the opposing party, the Democratic Party.
Now I just took the positive stakeholders. The negative stakeholders now now
what they want,
so now what was to do that map. So that map is from one extreme left to right. So the right extreme right who are very moderately identify the number, the dimension, then feed this, then community, now, so those are the this one identified them, and here, they are D4. The next is either 3 plus 1 plus 0, 3 minus 2 minus 1 minus. Then what is for those are 4, they are the ones that are
one other thing that I would do this kind of key.
you can just say high support.
So we had a rough hour. So me, what I mean is I thought. So that's a big difference, which is high and moderate. 0 is nothing. You don't need to fill it. It's one that so
Position of power. So what's the totally opposite. It's not new. When they want it to be
Make sure you get some strategies. Make sure you go think about which one is.
That's why that's here.
Make the position very attractive. At times, these are not Can make them concept numbers of people. So this one, what is happening? Medical association.
External development not as strong, as long as they're not as strong.
Plus or minus. Plus or zero.
But there's also something. That's what I said. They feel this
different ways already went into community.
So they are not operating the community
There's a constitutional right. There's a constitutional
Social media they propose that the plan receive from the foundation so that they could receive government that
Now for the political party, what is strategy?
Okay, think about which one is most important to deal with first. Okay? When the patriotic party leaders come to you and they say, Manuel, what am I supposed to do? How do I deal with all these difficult creditors? You figure, not me.
How about the ones that are sitting on the beds?
Public is like see what I want. We want to create a platform for things. Two things to enlighten the public for their use social media to save the importance of things. There is struggle with this situation now. Use the public now. Use the public to create social media through public campaigns, through use of flyers,
Mobilize demand.
There's an option of the president just going through without them. But we don't want to take that option. Yeah, that's the power comes. Yeah, they can introduce appropriation bills and use this power.
This is for me stuff.
They can also use their
How are you doing? How's the Nigerian team? My friends.
Yeah, but they are starting their budget. It's just to pass and let it start. It started without
The National Medical along payments, private doctors,
Which else? Who else wants pictures? Pictures? Want a picture of your group? Picture? Working hard? Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Those are the points.
What you want is
We lobby them to if you want us to be happy, so that we come to education support your make sure you don't support some of them
Okay. Okay. Okay, now we're ready to move to the group discussion. Okay, so the first thing that we have to agree on is you've all done your stakeholders. Even assessing the stakeholders is a subjective judgment. It's a group decision. And How much power do they have? The position is usually reasonably clear. The strategies are the area for creative thinking. Creative thinking. Okay, so which group, which stakeholder do you start with? Which one is most important in terms of a political obstacle to getting the reform adopted? This is, so we can think about the difference between adoption of a reform and implementation. Adoption happens either within the legislature or within the executive branch. Executive branch is the president and the cabinet. In this country, the reform is going through the legislature. So we need strategies to get adoption in the legislature. Okay? So who would like to start? Who has their suggestion about which group is most important to start with and your strategy to deal with it? Okay?
I don't know that we had a very detailed strategy, but to tell you a little bit of our thinking.
Let's start with the stakeholder first.
Okay. So the top stakeholder that we thought was most important to work with was the Democratic Party, just because they could boycott what we were putting forward.
Okay, the Democratic Party is the opposition.
Opposition, yes.
Okay, so hold on. Elisa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Democratic Party, they are the opposition. What's their position? What's their position on the proposal?
So they don't want it to pass, however...
Hold on.
Yeah.
What's their position on the policy? Are they for or against?
Against.
How strongly against?
Very strong.
Okay, so we'll give them
3 pluses.
3 pluses. Thank you. And how much power does the opposition party have?
We said medium/high because...
Medium/high.
Yeah.
What do people think? Hold on. Because?
Well, because we're currently in power. Our party's currently in power.
Right.
So we have the majority. So I think that's why we're putting them a bit more medium.
Right.
Because we
Why
have the
do you give them
advantage.
between medium and high?
Because they still presumably have a large share of support from voters in country.
Okay. Yes, sir.
It's the last year before the elections, so we presume that population don't like us anymore, and
so
they can be more powerful than after the elections.
So the opposition party, what level of power do you think they have?
I would say high.
High. The opposition party has high. Medium high. Does anyone think? So you agree? The year before the elections, medium high?
I think they have high power because I would assume that the fact that we didn't come true on our promise of giving healthcare, which was a huge thing that helped us win the election back in 2000, would mean that they probably now have made people see that we weren't able to do it, and they're more powerful than us by now.
So the Patriotic Party is thinking about the elections, and they're saying this opposition party could be a problem. Okay, so we will go with medium to high. Now, strategy. Okay, what do you think the Patriotic Party should do about the opposition? What do they do to deal with the opposition party?
We are ready to propose our play. Yeah?
Yes?
So we can propose our play. We don't go on stakeholders.
We're going stakeholder by stakeholder. I want to know what to do about the Democratic Party, which is, what do we do? You decided. You're not wasting. So one strategy, okay, is disregard. Okay, that's an interesting strategy, which is, as they say in New York, forget about it. Okay? So why? Why?
Because they are like 100% against us, so we
Yes,
just
100%
waste time on.
We're never going to
them.
persuade them. They're never going to change. Okay? And Do people agree? Who agrees? Who agrees? This is the forget about them, disregard. Okay? Who thinks you should do something else? Okay? What do you think you should do? What?
Take the subsidies, the cost subsidies from the Social Security Fund off the table in terms of financing the national health insurance.
Okay, so one strategy is change the policy and remove the Social Security subsidies, right? Okay, now, will that change their position? What do you think? What do you think? No. Will it change their position? Yes, because they're so opposed to it. Okay, so you believe in the rational action of the opposition. Okay. Any other thoughts? Will. So.
Well, there's another option. We can talk to the people from the Democratic Party and try to win their support by promising, for example, the post of a Minister of Health.
Okay.
And we get support through that.
Okay, good. Okay, so this is, negotiate, right? Negotiate. Offer them the Ministry of Health in the next government, or even then, even now.
Can you explain why you think this would work?
Because you did it in Kyrgyzstan.
Well, this is something that has been done in the past.
Yes.
Well, this is based on past experience.
Yes. So this is, this is.
Well, the selling point here is that this program, the reform program, is essentially the child of the Democratic Party. They are the ones that have designed it originally.
Right. It's very interesting. Actually, in this country, the reform that Obama did originally was from the Republican Party. Okay? Yes. So, even though reforms may have origins in the other party, sometimes people still oppose them. But it's an interesting idea. I like the idea of give them the Ministry of Health. Any other thoughts about how many people think that the opposition party is available for rational negotiation? Or how many people think they will negotiate? Negotiate? How many people think no negotiation? Okay. Well, it's a 60-40. Okay.
I'm in favor of combination.
But your position is that they will negotiate?
Well, I'll tell you. Okay, who's the next second important actor?
Do you think they will negotiate?
We will talk about what happened. Okay? This is a real story. This is based on a real story. But this, what's the implication of disregard? No. What's the implication of don't worry about the opposition party? What's the implication?
We shouldn't lose them out. We can lose them out of sight.
And because?
Because they're powerful. They're dangerous.
And
they're dangerous.
And will you be able to get your reform through?
No.
What did you say?
I said yes, because we have the majority in the parliament.
Okay, so this is disregard and push through. So it's not just forget about them, it's disregard and push through. Okay, so let's see, what's another big obstacle? Where's the mic?
Here.
Sorry. What's another big obstacle? What's the second biggest obstacle? The change team, okay? Technical
the technical team, the change team, and we're gonna give them 4 plus. No, 4 negative.
What's their
Negative.
Negative. How much power do they have?
They have power, technical power, high technical power.
We're talking about political power. We're not asking whether they're smart. We're asking, do they have political power?
I think they have, because these technical people can convince the president.
You're outvoted. Okay, what's the strategy for the technical team? Change them. Okay. That's some more members. Right? Do you want to tell us?
Yeah, I said change them.
Okay. Who do we change them with? Who do we put there?
People that will listen to the party.
Okay. So we
That the
put
party
in.
can control.
The change team gets changed. Change to political friends. Okay?
But with technical knowledge.
That what?
But with technical knowledge.
With technical knowledge. Okay. Here's an interesting question. How much technical knowledge do we want with the new change team? 40%? How much? 7?
I don't think the party wants any technical knowledge. They already opposed all the advice given by the technical team, which is supposed to be very smart. I think they already have their decisions made. I don't think they even need a technical team. They just need it for show to say our technical team approved this. Done.
Any thoughts? Agree? Disagree? Do you agree or disagree? Or you just want to speak?
I think it really depends on whether you have a long-term or short-term visions. If you just want the thing to pass the parliament, then you don't really care much about technical. But if you want it to sustain maybe at whatever plan that you propose to survive in year 2 or year 3, then you have to pay attention to the technical.
So what does the party want?
So party first want it to be passed and to win the elections. But I guess any party also want to stay in the election in power for a long time.
Okay.
Hopefully they think about the people.
This is an interesting question. What is the time horizon of the people who are the leaders of the party?
1 year.
Right? A year, right? Their time horizon extends to the next election and just after it. So their time horizon is at this moment, very focused. Okay? Their question is, how do we win the next election? Okay? So we'll just say limited technical knowledge. Okay?
I think I would oppose that. Just by experience, I've seen that happening. It's just like the one of the main issue, because you're going to start again discussion, so you will have the report 2 or 3 months after that. I think you have to pass the law within it. What you want them is just deliver the final conclusion and get away with it. Just even put resources or extend and give technical assistance in order to close this chapter and not start a new one.
Here's the interest. Your name is?
Adrian.
Adrian. So here's the interesting question. As an advisor to the party and the leaders of the party, how much do you make them aware of the risks of their strategies? Every strategy has benefits and risks, right? So the risk here is that this may succeed with short-term benefits, right? Which is you win the election, but it may create long-term problems, okay? Which is you have a poorly designed policy that has long-term structural issues, okay? And you know, if if I'm advising someone, I can tell them, here's what you need to do to win, okay? But it has some potential risks. Okay, this is a classic problem. You have short-term benefits, short-term success, but you create structural issues that may create long-term problems. Okay, and these are trade-offs. Okay, do we want to think about a third? Is there a third stakeholder?
I was thinking more like for the technical team, we can also extend the number of the people, so we can add more organizations who actually support the implementation of national insurance. For example, pharmaceutical companies and also national medical associations. So in that terms, we can outvote the so-called technical experts.
And have also their proposal.
So the proposal is to expand the technical team and include other stakeholders. What do people think about that? Does anyone like that? Should we put that up for a vote? Or do people think that's a good idea?
Yes, we're thinking about such opportunity, and also we're thinking about the role of donors organization, which have different opinions, but some of them are pro, which can strengthen the knowledge and capacity of this technical expert group.
Okay, so this would be strengthen the knowledge and capacity of the expert group along those lines, and create a more effective, thoughtful.
What's interesting, I'm thinking of the example here, is that you have, let's say, pharma companies or companies that produce research that produce results that benefit their own industry. And then you also have companies that buy into media, they buy ads, and that also benefits the sector in a certain way that's not necessarily the most responsible, but it's the most profitable. And so my question is, who's holding the government or the parties accountable, and how strong is that?
Okay. So remember, in this case, your job is to help the party and the leaders. Okay? Your job is to help them get a reform in a limited time. Okay, so let me tell you, this is based on Ghana. Okay? Ghana. Okay? And what happened in Ghana is that they first got rid of the change team, the technical team. They put in advisors that were sympathetic to the party. They designed a program with, as we know, the VAT, using the value-added tax, which was dedicated to health insurance. They promised a little bit of everything to everyone. They made exemptions for all kinds of groups. They made the annual premium something like $5, okay? Which means not very much, okay? They pushed it through the parliament, the legislature, because the opposition party walked out, okay? And they pushed it through. And it was agreed, it was passed into law, and it was considered, and still considered, one of the first national health insurance schemes in a low middle income country. So they got recognized for a significant achievement. It helped the party win. Okay, so they were back in power. Okay, so from a political and short-term policy perspective, it worked. Okay, would you like it? It has had long-term structural problems. Okay, some of those problems are problems with implementation, of getting the funds actually to reach the people who deliver the services. But some of it also has to do with the way that it was structured to get through the legislature and to win, help the party win in the elections. Okay? So the decisions that you make in getting something adopted, the political dimensions of getting something adopted have consequences for how the policy performs. Okay? But if you miss the window of opportunity, it may close forever, or may close for a long time. Okay? So windows of opportunity have, recognizing them, you can get through politically. It still means, because most of these reforms, including the one in the United States, are complicated animals. And they require adjustment and learning over time to make them work. Okay? Reform is not a single moment process. It's a long-term engagement. Julia, did you want to comment?
Yes, so I just wanted to say, yes, that was my beloved country.
As a Ghanaian.
Yes, I think that, yes, at the time, the political party may have thought it was what needed to be done in order to get them into power. But I think that the lesson for us is that, 18 years down the line, we're struggling with, what's really the National Health Insurance Scheme? What does it really provide to its people? Because not only is it bankrupt, but also providers do not accept they really don't accept the card, because they will not be paid for a really long time. And right now, we're revisiting the conversation on what do we need to do to rebuild the National Health Insurance Scheme. And therefore, I think a lot of what we're learning today is still relevant, and it just goes to underscore the fact that a lot of these things are work in progress. You learn, and hopefully you do better.
So, learning from implementation as you move forward and making corrections is essential, because there is no perfect policy, and because everything is designed with limitations. And sometimes it's designed for political reasons, sometimes it's designed because of lack of knowledge, but these are complex policies, and it requires time to correct as we move forward. Okay, reflections? Any reflections on this session?
Yes, please.
Why is Nigeria
We'll have our chance with Nigeria on Monday.
Actually, Ghana is our neighbor, they are our small brothers. Well, actually, in my opinion, actually, as a close watcher of the Ghanaian insurance, knowing full well that whatever policy that you're introducing, there are, like you said, the pros and also the risks. They had identified the risk from the beginning. They knew some of the risks that they would face at the end of the day, which most probably was financial entrapment. They would have done, after 5 years or 10 years, to review those challenges and begin to block them in order to move forward. That perhaps was not done, and that's why.
I actually think that some of the problems in Ghana are correctable. One of the big problems in Ghana is that the money doesn't reach the providers. Okay, that should be correctable. That's not a design problem. That's an implementation problem. What I would really like for this course, I'd like more materials on Ghana so we can learn from the 18 years of experience. Where are the written documents to help us learn? Okay? And I think that the bank has a responsibility here. The bank has a responsibility. There have been conferences. We don't have the materials available to learn. Okay? But every one of you is entering into the same process. Okay? Any other reflections on this session? Either about Ghana or about the process of doing an analysis like this? So one of the things I'd like you to take away is doing political analysis is not hard. Okay? We took something that an hour ago, 2 hours ago, most of you knew nothing. okay? But it is possible to do an analysis in a small group in thinking about stakeholders, thinking about positions of power, thinking about strategies in ways that actually helped us identify exactly what was done. This is something that needs to be incorporated into the process of trying to produce change. It's not easy to persuade some of the international agencies to do this. That includes the World Bank. So I've been teaching this session, more or less like this, with different cases, for 21 years, okay? As part of the World Bank, okay? It still is not integrated into the operations of the bank. There was a major reform in one region of the world. It's a $100 million reform, loan, okay? And they came to me last year and said, people who'd been through the course, they said, Michael, can you help, can you go and do this for us? I said, no, I'm not going there. I'm not going there to do it. I will supervise someone who does it, okay? So someone who'd been through the course, working with someone else who was the leader who'd been through the course, working with someone else who'd been through the course. They did it while I talked to them on the phone. But it took someone who'd been through the course to say, we should do this, working with people in the country. So it's not done by outsiders, it's done by people there to help them. One of the biggest advantages is that it helps you understand the positions of different groups. And it helps you think about ways to change the policy that will improve the policy and make it better and more acceptable. Okay? This is part of a, we can call it a managed deliberative process. It's deliberation, what Ibrahim said, consultation, talking with people about their views in the hopes that you come up with something that is both technically improved as well as politically feasible. Okay, any last comments? Anyone? So so we'll have a break. You then have group work. So I'll hang around a little bit for the group work to see you, because we'd like you to include a simple stakeholder analysis as part of your projects. Okay? Because you have proposals of changes you want to introduce to solve your problem. Who are your friends? Who are your enemies? Who's for it? Who's against it? What can you do to create a more supportive political environment so that the reforms that you want? One footnote here, guys. So, this analysis is designed to help you get what you want. It doesn't necessarily tell you whether what you want is good. Okay? That brings us back to ethics and values, technical quality, but this will help you improve the probability that your reform will get adopted. In the last session, we'll talk about, well, once you've got the reform, how do you actually implement it? Okay, so thank you very much.